This is the JackBord short-range proximity sensor. And what it does is it lets the JackBord determine how close something is up to about 5 centimeters away. This is ideal for things like collision detection or roughly getting an estimate of how far away something is from the sensor. The sensor works by using an infrared transmitter, which is this device here. It sends out a signal, and this device over here is a detector or a receiver of the signal. If there's nothing in front of the sensor, the infrared signal goes out and none is reflected back. But once an object comes close to the sensor, some of the infrared signal is reflected back and the sensor detects it. And that's how it knows that there's an object present. It can govern or determine the distance to the object reasonably well by looking at the amount of light that's reflected back. If it's a lot, the object is quite close, and if it's not so much, the object is further away. The sensor has 4 pins. The first one is the 3-volt power supply pin, which is this yellow one. The next one is the green ground pin. Next we have the digital output. So this is either 3 volts if there's no object in the sensor's range, or 0 volts if there is an object detected. And lastly we have the analog output. This is normally about 3 volts if there's no object in the detection range, and it goes down as an object is detected and gets closer. And finally, we have the mounting hole. This is also connected to ground. Now we're going to connect the sensor to the JackBord. To do this, we're going to bolt it onto port A using an M4 nut and bolt, and this is because we're going to use the pins from port A to control the sensor. And specifically, we need the analog inputs on port A. So the first thing we do is we take a green jumper wire and connect it to the ground pin on the JackBord, and take the other end and connect it to the green ground pin on the sensor, like this. Next, we need 3 volts power. So again, we come to the JackBord and connect the yellow wire to the 3 volt pin on the JackBord on port A, and then connect the other end to the 3 volt power input on the sensor. So now we have the green ground wire going from the sensor to the ground on the JackBord, and the 3 volt power supply wire coming from the JackBord and going into the 3 volt line on the sensor. Next, we're going to connect the black digital output of the sensor onto port pin A2 of the JackBord. And finally, we're going to connect the analog output of the sensor, which is the white one, onto port pin A1 of the JackBord. So now we have our sensor connected. We have the green power supply line from the sensor going to the green power supply line on the JackBord on port A. We have the yellow 3 volt power supply line going from the sensor to the 3 volt power on port A of the JackBord. Next, we have the digital black wire, which is the sensor's digital output, going to port pin A2 on the JackBord. And finally, the white analog output from the sensor goes to port pin A1 on the JackBord. Now that you've made your connections, just check them against this picture and make sure that they match. In the next video, we're going to learn how to use the sensor. You can get directly to this video by going to the JackBord website at www.jackbord.org, and at the search prompt, type the TMT code shown on the screen. Press enter and you'll be taken straight to that video. In the meantime, if you want any other information or are just curious, you can visit us on www.jackbord.org.